First of all, thank you all. I appreciate you all being here today. On Tuesday, November the 8th, 2022, Jorge Miguel Lopez, date of birth March the 31st, 2005, of Jacksonville, North Carolina, was shot and killed by a detective assigned to the Special Operations Division and Tactical Team with the Jacksonville Police Department. This incident occurred on Old White Street, directly in front of 239 Station Street in Jacksonville, North Carolina. After reviewing the investigation of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, Lopez's death, while tragic, was justified because Lopez's actions caused a detective with the Jacksonville Police Department to reasonably believe it necessary to use deadly force to protect his life and the life of others at the scene. To give you some background on this, on November the 8th of 2022, detectives and other officers of the Jacksonville Police Department were engaged in their annual firearm training qualification at the Jacksonville Police Department shooting range. The detective in question is a member of Special Operations Division, which is plain clothes. He is tasked with investigating vice, drug, organized crime activity, including gang investigations. He's also a member of the SWAT team, the tactical team with the Jacksonville Police Department. At approximately 3:52 p.m. on November the 8th, the detective was called by another detective with the Jacksonville Police Department to assist in a possible armed robbery at the Jacksonville Mall. That detective proceeded to the Jacksonville Mall. Pursuant to that investigation, it was determined that no robbery had occurred. And that robbery is in no way related to what we're about to talk about, but that's why the officer was in the area. The detective and the second detective left the scene together in a Dodge Charger. They were returning to the Jacksonville Police Department. The second detective, also a member of JPD, was driving the vehicle. The detective in question was a passenger in the Dodge Charger. This Dodge Charger has blue lights. It's equipped with a siren. The detective was wearing civilian clothes that day. He was armed with a JPD authorized personal Glock 19 9mm and a holster on his belt, which was not concealed. He was wearing a gold and silver detective badge affixed on his belt directly in front of the holster. The Dodge Charger left the Jacksonville Mall, proceeded to Western Boulevard in the direction of Highway 17, which is, of course, Marine Boulevard, turned left on the Country Club Road, which becomes Hargett Street. And I'm going to show you a map in just a moment. At approximately 4:54 p.m., both detectives observed a dark in color Chevrolet Malibu directly in front of the detective's vehicle. This was on Hargett Street. The Malibu accelerated on Hargett Street and then changed lanes to the middle turn lane to pass an SUV that was directly in front of the Malibu. The Malibu was driving at an estimated speed of in excess of 60 miles per hour. The posted speed limit along that particular stretch of highway is 35 miles per hour. The Malibu passed in the center lane. Both detectives believed that the Malibu was operating in a reckless manner and posed a substantial risk to other motorists and pedestrians in the area. The vehicle was later determined to be a 2022 four-door Chevrolet Malibu registered to Elizabeth Aguirre Chavez of Onslow County. The detectives accelerated to catch the Malibu and observed the Malibu conduct a U-turn at a high rate of speed at an intersection of Hargett Street and York Street. Other traffic was oncoming. The Malibu was now facing the detective's vehicle. The detectives activated their blue light and siren. They conducted a U-turn behind the Malibu. The Malibu continued driving at a high rate of speed on Hargett Street toward Bell Fork Road. The detective in the passenger seat noted that the driver of the Malibu was a black male, and the detective recognized the driver as a gang member in Jacksonville. The detective believed there were a total of 4 individuals inside the Malibu. The detective in the passenger seat radioed JPD communications that they were in pursuit. The Malibu approached the intersection of Hargett Street and Bell Fork Road at a high rate of speed. The light was red, and several vehicles were stopped on Hargett Street at the light. The Malibu proceeded into the opposite lane of travel, facing incoming traffic, and the vehicle turned right, narrowly missing 2 vehicles on Bell Fork Road. The detective turned right on the Bell Fork Road and observed the Malibu turn left on the West Huff Drive. The detectives turned left on the West Huff Drive and continued pursuit. The Malibu passed Onslow Memorial Hospital on West Huff Drive and was estimated to be driving at over 70 miles per hour. The posted speed limit along that particular section of the highway is 45. The Malibu abruptly turned right into Old White Street and lost control. The Malibu came to a rest at the bottom of a ditch on Old White Street, approximately 100 feet from the intersection of Station Street. The ditch is directly in front of Southeastern Medical Oncology Center. Give you some idea of what we're talking about. This here is the bypass around Jacksonville. This here is Hargett Street that suddenly becomes Country Club Road, which if you go up, it'll hit Western Boulevard. This over here is West Huff. Onslow Memorial Hospital is right here. If you continue on this street, this will take you to Old White Street, will eventually take you to Western Boulevard, which is right over here. Of course, the mall will be just down the street from the hospital. The officers were at the mall, which would be over here. They went down West Hargett Street, on Hargett Street, this way. It is around this area that they saw the Malibu. The Malibu was heading in a direction toward the downtown area of Jacksonville. It is up here at York Street that the Malibu made a U-turn, still at a high rate of speed. The officers also made a U-turn, began pursuing the Malibu. The Malibu comes up to Bell Fork Road. Bell Fork Road runs this way, eventually connects into Highway 24. If you go this way, it becomes Gum Branch Road and connects into Highway 17, Marine Boulevard. They make a right on Bell Fork Road. At that time, the Malibu then makes a left, still at a high rate of speed, onto West Huff Street. West Huff Street, of course, goes under the bypass, or over the bypass. Right here, around is a curvy street. The Onslow Memorial Hospital is located over here to your left as you're heading toward Western Boulevard. As you are right here, Old White Street is a sharp curve to get on it. The vehicle entered Old White Street, went over to the left-hand side of the street, overcorrected, and landed up in the ditch. Map up here as well that shows the same area. You can see this is the blue would be the lane that they were the direction of travel which they were following the Malibu until it wrecked over here. The officers, the detective in question observed the right front passenger of the Malibu struggling to exit the vehicle through an open window on the passenger side. The detective climbed out of the ditch near the sidewalk adjacent to Old White Street and began moving toward the passenger, who was later identified as the decedent, Jorge Miguel Lopez. Lopez exited the Malibu on the passenger side and began running out of the ditch, not complying with the detective's command. The detective drew his service weapon and pointed at Lopez. The detective told Lopez in a loud voice, "Police, get on the ground." Show you exactly where this occurred. This area up here, this is Huff Street, would be right here. Comes off of Bell Fork Road. Here's Huff Street. As you get right there, this will be Old White on the bigger map. West Huff, this is the Onslow Memorial Hospital right over here. This is the Southeastern Oncology Center right here at 239. As you can see, there is a sharp turn right there to exit off of Huff Street. Then there's another turn. The vehicle, the Malibu, went over to the left-hand side of the road, overcorrected, and landed in the ditch right in front of Southeastern. And I've got some photographs to show you the ditch area. This is the vehicle as it was found in the ditch. As you can see, it's quite a substantial ditch there. The vehicle was pointing toward Western Boulevard. The passenger, Mr. Lopez, was sitting here in the front seat. There is a driver and two other passengers in the back seat. The officer observes Mr. Lopez exit this side into the ditch. The officer is behind him in the Dodge Charger. Here's another photograph. This shows the officer's Dodge Charger, which is right up here with the blue lights on. He's parked behind the Malibu. You can tell from this angle what a ditch it is. They were not able to get the door open very much on this side, but he was able to get out, come up here, and there's a sidewalk then up here at the top of the ditch, and that's approximately where the shooting occurred. Another direction showing from the front of the vehicle facing back toward West Huff Street, or West Huff Drive, you'll observe the vehicle and the way it is in the ditch. Quite a steep ditch there. Southeastern Oncology Center is located over here to the left. The hospital would be behind you, which you actually see some of it back there. The officer, the detective, got closer to Lopez. He is yelling at him to please get on the ground. Lopez had gotten out of the vehicle. He says that the individual approached the officer and that the detective clearly observed a handgun in Lopez's left hand. The detective stated he was approximately 7 to 10 feet away, directly to the right of Lopez. The detective continued to give loud commands while the detective continued to point his firearm at Lopez. The detective stated that Lopez turned his body to face the detective while raising his left arm and pointing the handgun at the detective. The detective said he fired 4 rounds in immediate succession at Lopez. The detective stated he is trained to shoot until the individual is no longer a threat. The detective stated he believed Lopez was going to shoot him, and the detective fired his firearm in self-defense. The detective who fired the shots stated that Lopez fell to the ground on his stomach, and Lopez was flailing his arms on the ground. The firearm that Lopez was holding fell to the ground near Lopez. The detective told Lopez to put his hand out, and Lopez complied. The detective rolled Lopez onto his back, and he began assessing his injuries. The detective observed a large amount of blood coming from Lopez's right side rib cage, with a bullet entry wound to the right side of Lopez's upper ribs. The detective entered aid to Lopez by applying pressure over Lopez's wound in an attempt to seal the wound. The detective did not have immediate access to his radio or telephone, or his phone, so he requested an onlooker who's over at the oncology center at the front door to call 911. The onlooker called 911 at 4:58 p.m. EMS was notified at 5 o'clock p.m. and EMS dispatched to the scene at approximately 5:01 p.m. EMS arrived at the scene at approximately 5:05 p.m. At approximately 5:14 p.m., EMS began transport of Lopez to Naval Hospital Camp Lejeune, which is a certified trauma center. At 5:22 p.m., EMS arrived at Naval Hospital Camp Lejeune. At 5:34 p.m., Lopez was pronounced dead at that hospital. On January the 11th, 2023, the Jacksonville Police Department located and interviewed the individual who made the 911 call. The individual stated he was outside the oncology center. He stated he observed a young man running across the parking lot. And actually, there were 3 people that ran across that parking lot from the evidence. He said his car was parked at the main door of the oncology center. The witness observed the police car behind the Malibu in the ditch. The witness thought the person who was driving the car got out of the car after they ran into the ditch and pulled a gun. In fact, it was not the driver, it was the passenger, Mr. Lopez. He said police told the individual, later identified as Lopez, to freeze and shot him. The detective told the witness to call 911. The witness saw a gun lying in the grass. He did not see the shooting, but did hear the gunshots. He saw another plainclothes officer chasing an individual through the oncology center parking lot. Other Jacksonville Police Department officers arrived on scene and provided medical assistance to Lopez. While at the scene, the detective in question stated to a supervisor that he pulled a gun and I shot him. As he pointed to the gun on the sidewalk near Lopez. And we have a picture of the actual firearm that was located. This is the firearm that had been in the possession of Lopez. The detective provided a statement to another supervisor at the scene that when Lopez got out of the vehicle and turned toward the detective, Lopez had a handgun in his hand. The detective said he shot several times at Lopez, who fell to the ground. The detective was then transported to the Jacksonville Police Department by a JPD sergeant, and at the Jacksonville Police Department he was interviewed by the State Bureau of Investigation. The firearm recovered at the scene, the one pictured there, was a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson M&P Shield with an identifiable serial number. There is no evidence that Lopez ever fired his weapon. There's no evidence. The evidence does show that his weapon was unloaded, but the officer did not know that when it was pointed at him. The Malibu was towed to the Jacksonville Police Department, searched by crime scene investigators of the Jacksonville Police Department. From the driver's area in the vehicle, a Ziploc bag with approximately 13 grams of white powder was located. This item tested presumptive positive for cocaine. In the center console cubby below the radio, 2 bags of suspected marijuana were located, each in excess of 28 grams. In the glove box, a box of Hornady .40 caliber bullets containing 15 bullets were located. The box containing the 15 bullets could hold 20 bullets. In the right front passenger door pocket, a digital scale and clear plastic bags were found. On the front passenger floorboard, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson magazine containing 6 bullets and 1 loose .40 caliber bullet was located. In the rear passenger area, 2 digital scales, clear plastic baggies, and 5 baggies of suspected marijuana was located, containing approximately 86 grams of controlled substances. The second detective made a statement. He began pursuit of the fleeing suspects. He heard gunshots coming from the direction of the detective in question, but did not see the shooting. He observed the detective in question standing over Lopez, pointing his firearm and giving commands. Another officer arrived in a patrol vehicle and proceeded to the other suspects. That officer apprehended one of the suspects, and the second detective took custody of that suspect. Additional officers of the Jacksonville Police Department, also EMS, arrived on scene, attempted life-saving measures on Lopez. Officers observed a handgun a few feet from Lopez. Lopez was conscious and alert at this time. An officer heard Lopez say, "I'm too young for this. Don't let me die." Another officer heard Lopez say, "Please don't let me die. I'm too young to die." Another officer heard Lopez ask, "Why did you shoot me?" "And I don't want to die." On November the 8th, 2022, a second detective was interviewed by Special Agent Houston of the SBI. The detective in question was interviewed on the same date by Special Agent Kensington of the SBI. The interview of the detective who shot Lopez began at approximately 6:38 p.m. with a waiver as Miranda warnings and ended at approximately 9:29 p.m. The total time in the interview room was approximately 3 hours and 16 minutes. I have listened to that video. An officer apprehended one of the suspects, and the other suspect fled into the wood line. The apprehended individual was charged by the Jacksonville Police Department with possession with intent to manufacture, sell, and deliver marijuana, manufacture of marijuana, misdemeanor hit and run, leaving the scene of an accident with property damage, and resisting a law enforcement officer. He was secured under a $12,000 bond and placed in the Onslow County Detention Center. On November 9th, 2022, the alleged operator of the Malibu was taken into custody. The Jacksonville Police Department searched the alleged operator of the Malibu and found 2 cell phones, $1,797 in cash, keys, and a vape. This individual was charged with felonious speeding to elude arrest, no operator's license, resisting a public officer, misdemeanor hit and run, leaving the scene with property damage, possession with intent to manufacture, sell, and deliver marijuana, manufacture of marijuana, possession with intent to manufacture, sell, and deliver cocaine, manufacture of cocaine, second-degree trespass, and several motor vehicle violations. He was secured in the Onslow County Detention Center with a $500,000 secured bond. So to sum up, there were 4 individuals in the Malibu. The operator of the Malibu was apprehended and charged with numerous drug and motor vehicle offenses. Those cases are pending. The passenger in the front seat, Jorge Miguel Lopez, was shot and subsequently died at the hospital. The passenger in the rear driver's seat was apprehended and charged with drug and other offenses. A juvenile, age 17, was in the rear passenger side seat, and no juvenile petitions have been filed with the North Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice as of yesterday. Of course, that's in their discretion. My involvement in this investigation began on November the 8th of 2022 at approximately 5:09 p.m. I received a call from Chief Michael Yanero of the Jacksonville Police Department. I was in Duplin County at the time. I was told at that time that an officer-involved shooting had occurred on Old White Street in Jacksonville. I was informed that the Jacksonville Police Department was at the scene and the North Carolina SBI had been contacted. On November 8th, I joined with Chief Yanero and requested the SBI investigate this shooting, and I confirmed the same by letter to the SBI on November 10th. As soon as I got off the phone with Chief Yanero, I called one of my Chief Assistant District Attorney Michael Maltzby, who was in Jacksonville. I requested that he go to the scene at that time, and he in fact met Chief Yanero at the scene. Chief Yanero, Mike Maltzby, kept me updated while I was in Duplin County that evening. On November 9th, 2022, I participated in a brief press conference with Chief Yanero at the Jacksonville Police Department to inform the public that the matter was under investigation by the SBI. I have had contact with the lead SBI agent, Special Agent Houston, since November the 9th, 2022, through and including yesterday, January 24th. In addition, I've been in contact with Special Agent in charge of the SBI, Brinzel, many times over the past week particularly. On December 9th, 2022, prior to meeting with the agents of the SBI, I assigned Assistant District Attorney Brittany Smiley to assist me in this investigation. On December 22nd, 2022, this office received the Jacksonville Police Department reports involving the events leading up to the shooting and the shooting itself. On December 27th, the SBI report was made available on the DA portal for download. And after my office downloaded the SBI file and organized the same, I received it on January 3rd of 2023. On January 17th, 2023, this office received a copy of the 3+ hour SBI interview of the detective in question. Assistant District Attorney Brittany Smiley and I have reviewed the JPD investigation, which includes 24 officers' reports, the SBI investigation, which includes 10 interviews of officers of the Jacksonville Police Department, EMS personnel, and a suspect, review of the EMS reports, and contact with Joseph Pessner, a pathologist with the Brody School of Medicine at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. I do not actually have an autopsy report back yet. However, on January 19th of 2023, I telephoned Dr. Pessner. He stated that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the torso. He stated the autopsy on Lopez was performed at Brody School of Medicine on November 17, 2022. He said the autopsy shows 5 gunshot wounds with 4 projectiles, and I'm going to explain that. Starting at the top of the decedent. And again, the number that I'm providing for these wounds does not indicate that is in the order in which they were fired. It's simply from the top of the body to the lower part of the body. They've been numbered. Gunshot number 1 was to the right top shoulder, top right shoulder of Lopez, striking the humerus, right lung, and heart. This projectile was recovered. This would have been a fatal wound. Gunshot wound number 2 was to the right side of the chest, bruising the lung into the liver and stomach. This projectile was recovered in an autopsy. Gunshot wound number 3 was to the right side of the lower back, going into the kidney, the abdomen, and to the intestine. This projectile was recovered. Gunshots wounds number 4 and 5 appear to be the same projectile, with an entrance and exit wound to the back of the right arm, and then entrance wound to the right side. So there's a through and through the right arm, then entered the body again. This projectile was recovered. The trajectory of the projectiles went downward from the right side of Lopez, which would consist of him getting out of the vehicle and then facing the officer, because the officer would have been to his right. There is no evidence of any close contact wounds. Again, the officer said he was about 7 to 10 feet away from Lopez. 4 projectiles were recovered. Dr. Pestner did note an elongated abrasion on the right side of the chest of Lopez, which could be consistent with a possible bullet grazing the chest, but not able to confirm that. We also do not know if that was caused by him trying to get out of the vehicle. Dr. Pestner noted that the wound to the heart would be fatal, although not immediately so. This is confirmed by the fact that while at the scene, Lopez continued to converse with the officers. As to video, due to the detectives operating in an undercover capacity, there was no dash camera in the Dodge Charger or body cameras worn by the detectives. There was also no video of the incident from nearby businesses, although the Jacksonville Police Department, FBI, checked these places. There was no video located of use. We did have a DVR, digital video recorder, from Southeastern Medical Oncology Center, which was examined at the North Carolina State Crime Lab in Raleigh, but no video footage was recovered. The detective who fired the fatal shots indicated that Lopez pointed his firearm in the direction of the detective on scene. The detective stated that Lopez turned his body to face the detective while Lopez was simultaneously raising his left arm up and pointing the handgun at the detective. After being shot and incapacitated by the detective, Lopez ceased to be a threat to the detective. The shooting death of Lopez is found to be justified to protect the safety and lives of the law enforcement officers from potential harm as perceived by a law enforcement officer at the scene. The general rules of self-defense and defense of others in the state of North Carolina allow for the use of deadly force when the individual actually or honestly believe the need to defend himself or others from death or great bodily injury, and the individual's belief is reasonable considering the circumstances they appeared to him at the time. Clearly, from the facts and circumstances of this case, the detective was justified in using deadly force to defend himself and others from death or great bodily injury, due to the fact that Lopez had pointed a firearm at the detective. Law enforcement officers are required to instantaneously evaluate and employ force against possible criminal suspects to thwart apparent dangers to citizens and themselves. Lopez pointed a firearm at a law enforcement officer, which is a criminal offense in the state of North Carolina. Officers must perceive, evaluate, decide, and then act, often in a matter of seconds. The detective in this case perceived a threat and immediately returned fire to neutralize that threat. The perceived danger to the officer must be only apparent, not actual, to justify use of deadly force. Apparent danger is such that would cause a reasonable person to believe that he or others were in danger of death or great bodily harm. Pointing a firearm at someone would be apparent danger. From the evidence, it reasonably appeared to the detective was sufficient evidence for self-defense and defense of others. Federal courts in this nation have held the United States Constitution simply does not require police to gamble with their lives in the face of a serious threat of harm. The law of this nation and of this state authorize an officer to take preemptive action and use deadly force to prevent death or serious injury to himself, provided that the threat assessment is reasonably made. As the United States Supreme Court has observed, the calculus of reasonableness must allow for the fact that law enforcement officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. In addition, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 15A-401 D2, a law enforcement officer is justified in using deadly physical force upon another person to defend himself or a third person for what he reasonably to be used or imminent use of deadly physical force. There is evidence that 4 shots were fired in rapid succession at the scene by one law enforcement officer. Lopez was struck 4 times. There is no evidence that the number of shots fired by the detective was excessive. Even if there are an excessive number of shots fired, the question is whether perceived threat has been neutralized for the safety of the law enforcement officer firing his weapon, as well as another law enforcement officer in the immediate area. Based upon my review Of the facts of this case, after consultation with the State Bureau of Investigation, after working with Assistant District Attorney Brittany Smiley, I have determined that the shooting of Lopez on November 8, 2022 was justified to protect the safety and lives of the officers on scene. The detective who fired the fatal shots perceived an apparent threat, evaluated the situation in seconds, decided, and acted. They appear reasonable under all the circumstances of this case. From the evidence, the detective initially exercised restraint in the face of imminent danger as Lopez displayed a weapon towards the detective after the detective approached Lopez. He faced an apparent danger as perceived by him. As tragic as this incident is, particularly for the decedent's family, because there has been loss of life, the detective on scene was nonetheless justified in defending himself and other law enforcement officers from death or great bodily harm. There is insufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to show the detective who fired the fatal shots acted in a manner that was inconsistent with the perception of an apparent threat. In fact, my review of the incidents indicates there is no evidence the detective who fired the fatal shots acted in any manner that is inconsistent with the threat he perceived, and certainly no evidence that the detective acted in any way contrary or in violation of North Carolina law. I appreciate the investigation by Special Agent in Charge Brinzel, Special Agent Houston, Special Agent Kensington, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. I appreciate the reports and cooperation of Chief Yanero and the Jacksonville Police Department. I appreciate Chief Yanero calling me within minutes after this happening. I have determined that the shooting death of Jorge Miguel Lopez is justified and no criminal charges against the officer involved in this matter are warranted under the law and under the circumstances revealed by the independent SBI investigation. Anyone have any questions?
You said earlier on when you were talking that the officers recognized the people in the car as
at least one of the people.
Yeah, from a potential gang. Was that information confirmed later on during the investigation that they were, in fact, members of a gang?
At least one, yes. At least one.
Did you said Lopez didn't shoot at the officer?
That's correct. Lopez never fired his weapon. In fact, his weapon was not loaded. But of course, the officer would not know that when Lopez displayed the weapon and pointed it at the officer.
My next question is, the officer at the time was placed on an administrative leave. Is he back at the at JPD working now?
He's at the Jacksonville Police Department, but he's not on the road. He has been not working the road since this happened. I've been in contact a lot with Chief Yanero. This person has not been working, that means since November the 8th. Although at the station doing administrative duties, he's not been on the roads.
I know I walked in like a little bit later on, and I'm new at this one. Did this chase start, like, was it a traffic stop, or what was it again that started it?
It was Malibu that was going at a high rate of speed on Hargett Street.
Okay.
And the officers in a Dodge Charger followed behind this Malibu. They observed this Malibu operate in a reckless manner, passing in a no passing zone, which is a middle lane, then suddenly make a U-turn, also a dangerous U-turn on this road, come back toward the officers in the opposite direction, continue to accelerate on high speed, almost caused an accident there at Bell Fork Road, and then proceeded to West Huff Street, where West Huff Drive made a left, continued at a high rate of speed, eventually wrecking on Old White Street.
And then, did you say you didn't have the report? What was it that you said you didn't have back yet? The full medical?
I don't have the autopsy report, and that could be 6 to 8 months before I get that. But I did, in fact, speak by telephone to the pathologist, and I was able to get a detailed summary of his autopsy, his findings, and his opinion as to cause of death.
Ernie, just for points of clarity, everybody in the car was not a juvenile?
That's correct. That's correct. And the reason I did not name the adults, even though that's technically public record, is because they do have charges pending at this time, and also those charges are pending with this office, and to ensure that their due process rights are not violated and they have a right to a fair trial, I did not divulge their names.
Understandable. As far as
there's also one juvenile. There is one juvenile. That will be up to juvenile justice as to what action, if any, they take against him.
Understood.
I did not release his name either, of course.
Understood, understood. One follow-up question there. Who are the officers involved in this shooting?
Yeah, I'm not going to divulge their names. The reason is because none of the officers are being charged. I also, this is all about officer safety as far as I'm concerned. I've already given you some indication that one of these individuals is related to gang. I'm not saying those individuals may not find out the names. They're not going to find out the name from me at this time. Again, it comes down to officer safety.
Did any of the other ones get out of the car? Or
Yes, 3 of the individuals, actually all 4 eventually got out of the car. 3 of them got away at that time. One was subsequently captured, another one the next day. And as to Mr. Lopez, though, he was in the right front passenger seat. His door is up near the ditch in that picture, and he had some difficulty getting out.
I just wanted to ask a couple more questions as far as the fatal shot. Was that determined by the coroner or by whoever examined the body?
Yes, sir. I talked to pathology, indicated that the shot to the heart would have been a fatal wound.
And that was the one that came in from the right shoulder, or was that the one that came directly? I know you listed all 5.
I listed all 5, and I believe I had listed as gunshot wound number 1, and let me look at that again.
Right shoulder was number 1, I believe. Right top
Yes,
chest.
that's the top right shoulder of Lopez, striking the humerus, right lung, and heart.
Understood.
And that would be the fatal one, but we do not know that was the first shot fired.
Right. No particular order, just
No particular order.
That was the one that was fatal. And I think the only other question I have right now is just in pertinence to the surveillance footage, dash cams, body cams, whatever. Would that have been something that may have buttoned this up a little bit quicker? Would that have been something that benefited this investigation a little bit more, or just from your personal perspective? I
don't know it would have made it any quicker, because I've done 12 officer-involved shootings in my career as district attorney. And sometimes I have dash cams, sometimes I have body cams, sometimes I don't. I don't know if it really makes it quicker, but it just certainly then adds some clarification as to what happened. Obviously, if there had been any type of video from the business or for officers, I would have looked at it. I would have reviewed it. But of course, even with the audio, even with the video, I'm still going to look at all the statements and all the reports too to make sure everything is consistent. Good question, though.
I think I'm good.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Well, when we say the generic cause of death was the gunshot wound to the torso or just the heart?
It was a gunshot wound to the heart.
To the heart, okay.
That would be the cause of death. He actually said cause of death is gunshot wound to the torso, but it's actually to the heart.
Okay.
And one other thing, we do not have a toxicology report back yet either. Toxicology would be checked to see if there's any type of alcohol or other drugs in Lopez's system. Do not have that back yet. That could be 8 months out before I get that back. Anyway, I just want to thank State Bureau of Investigation for the investigation. I also want to thank the Jacksonville Police Department, particularly Chief Gennaro, who has stayed in touch with me throughout this investigation. And I really appreciate him contacting me right after it happened. As District Attorney, I think it's very important that the DA's office get involved in these type of cases as early as possible. And in fact, I made the decision at the scene in Duplin County that I'm going to have an ADA go to the scene. And as a prosecutor, I can tell you that it's invaluable going to the scene to see what it really looks like. I've been to the scene since then. I'm very familiar with the ditch area. I'm very familiar with the oncology center, where the hospital is located, and all those type of things, how the roads. But I was not there the night it actually happened. But I did have an ADA show up, and that's invaluable to me because I was on the phone with him many times that night, along with Chief Gennaro, about this matter. I also appreciate Brittany looking at this case with me too. These things take a lot of work. We spent many late hours here, after hours, reviewing these reports because during the day we're often doing other things. And we were here late at night working on this case, trying to get it done as quickly as we could.
All right, thank you so much for having us.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Can I get a copy of the report?